I never thought my face could be used against me. Until the night my twin sister walked into the restaurant wearing my favorite dress, holding my boyfriend's hand, and pretending to be me. For 25 years, I have looked in the mirror and seen two faces. There is my face, Zoe, and then there is her face, Mia. We are identical in every physical way. We have the same chestnut hair that falls in loose waves over our shoulders. We have the same olive skin and the same small, slightly crooked nose. Even our eyes, a deep shade of hazel that changes color depending on the light, are exactly the same. When we were children, our mother used to paint Mia's fingernail red just to tell us apart. But as we grew older, the differences became internal. I was the quiet one, the responsible one, the one who organized her books by color and finished her homework on Friday nights. Mia was the storm. She was loud, chaotic, and charming. She broke rules just to see what would happen. And she broke hearts because she got bored easily. People always say that having a twin is like having a built-in best friend. In many ways, that is true. We share a bond that nobody else can understand. But there is a darker side to being a twin, a side that people rarely talk about. There is a constant comparison. There is a silent competition. And sometimes there is jealousy. I loved my sister, but I did not know that she wanted my life. I did not know that she was looking at my happiness and thinking, I could do that better. It all started on a Tuesday in November. I remember the date clearly because the weather had turned suddenly cold, and the wind was stripping the last of the orange leaves from the trees. I had been dating Mark for 6 months. Mark was everything I was not. He was spontaneous and funny, but he was also kind and incredibly loyal. He was an architect who loved to sketch buildings on napkins when we went out for coffee. He made me feel safe, and for the first time in my life, I felt like someone saw me, not just one of the twins. That Tuesday, I was supposed to meet Mark for our anniversary dinner. We were celebrating 6 months together. He had booked a table at a fancy Italian restaurant downtown, the kind of place with white tablecloths and candlelight. A place I had wanted to visit for years. I had bought a new dress for the occasion, a deep emerald green silk dress that made me feel elegant and mature. However, life rarely goes according to plan. By noon, I knew something was wrong. My head was pounding, my throat felt like I had swallowed broken glass, and my body was shivering uncontrollably. I had caught the flu that was going around my office. I tried to ignore it. I drank tea with honey. I took medicine. I told myself, Zoe, you cannot miss this date. It is important. But by 4 o'clock in the afternoon, I could barely stand up. I was lying on my sofa, wrapped in 3 blankets, with a fever that made the room spin. I knew I had to cancel. I picked up my phone, my fingers trembling, and typed a message to Mark. Mark, I am so sorry. I think I have the flu. I can't stop shaking. We have to reschedule dinner. I'm devastated. I was about to press send when I heard the key turn in my front door. Zoe, are you home? It was Mia. She breezed into the apartment like a hurricane, carrying a bag of takeout food and wearing a leather jacket that looked expensive. She stopped when she saw me on the sofa. Whoa, she said, dropping her bag on the table. You look terrible. No offense. Thanks, I whispered, my voice hoarse. I feel terrible. Mia walked over and placed her cool hand on my forehead. Her expression softened. You're burning up, Zoe. You have a serious fever. I know, I groaned. I have to cancel my date with Mark. It's our 6-month anniversary. Mia looked at me, and then she looked at the emerald green dress hanging on the back of my bedroom door. It was perfectly ironed and ready to be worn. She walked over to it and ran her fingers down the silk fabric. It's a beautiful dress, she said softly. It would be a shame to waste the reservation. Mark is probably already on his way, isn't he? He leaves work at 5, I said, closing my eyes. I need to text him. Don't worry, Mia said. Her voice sounded strange, a little too cheerful. I'll make you some soup. You just rest. Put the phone down. Sleep. I was so exhausted that I didn't argue. I dropped my phone on the rug. The last thing I remember was Mia covering me with another blanket and the sound of her humming a tune. I fell into a deep, feverish sleep. When I woke up, the apartment was dark. The digital clock on the microwave read 11:30 p.m. My head still hurt, but the shivering had stopped. I sat up slowly, feeling weak and thirsty. I looked around the room. Mia, I called out. There was no answer. The apartment was empty. I stood up and walked to the kitchen to get a glass of water. That was when I noticed the bedroom door was open. The hanger on the back of the door was empty. The emerald green dress was gone. My heart started to beat faster, and it wasn't because of the fever. I ran to the bathroom. My makeup bag, which I had left on the counter, was open. My favorite lipstick, the specific shade of red I only wore for Mark, was uncapped. Confusion washed over me. Maybe she moved the dress, I thought. Maybe she borrowed the makeup. Mia borrowed my clothes all the time. It was annoying, but it was normal. I went back to the living room and found my phone. There were 3 new messages. I unlocked the screen, expecting to see a worried text from Mark asking why I hadn't shown up. Instead, I saw a text from Mark sent at 10:45 p.m. Tonight was incredible. I've never seen this side of you before, Zoe. You were so funny and wild. I love you. Sleep well. I stared at the screen. The words blurred before my eyes. Tonight was incredible. My hands started to shake again. I sat down on the edge of the sofa. I had not left the apartment. I had been asleep for 6 hours. If Mark had dinner with Zoe, and I was here, a cold realization settled in my stomach like a heavy stone. Mia. I dialed Mia's number. It went straight to voicemail. I dialed again. Nothing. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. I sat in the dark, staring at the wall, waiting for my sister to come back. My mind was racing with questions. Why would she do this? Did she think it was a harmless prank? Or was it something worse? Mia didn't come back to my apartment that night. The next morning, the sun rose, bright and offensive, shining through my windows. I still felt sick, but the anger was stronger than the virus. I called Mark. "Hey," Mark answered on the first ring. His voice was full of energy. "How are you feeling this morning? You seemed fine last night, but you drank a lot of wine. Do you have a headache?" I swallowed hard. I had a choice. I could tell him the truth right now. I could say, "Mark, that wasn't me." But I hesitated. I was scared. If I told him, he would feel betrayed. He might think I was playing a game. Or worse, he might admit that he liked the other Zoe better. I'm okay," I lied. My voice was shaky. "Mark, about last night. My memory is a little fuzzy. I think the wine went to my head. What exactly did we talk about?" Mark laughed. "Oh, come on, Zoe. You don't remember. You were telling me about your dream to travel to South America. You said you were tired of your job and wanted to quit and just backpack through Peru. I was surprised. You usually love your job. You're always so focused on your career." I felt a sharp pain in my chest. I did love my job. I was a graphic designer, and I had worked hard to get my position. Mia was the one who hated working. Mia was the one who wanted to backpack through Peru. "Right," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "South America. Did I say anything else?" "You were just so free," Mark continued. "You danced with the waiter. You laughed so loud people were staring at us. It was amazing. I feel like we really connected. You danced with the waiter. The image made me sick. I am shy. I do not dance with waiters." "I have to go, Mark," I said abruptly. "I'll call you later." I hung up and threw the phone onto the cushion. I was furious. She hadn't just pretended to be me. She had pretended to be a different version of me. A version she thought was better. 2 hours later, Mia walked through the door. She was wearing my green dress. It was wrinkled now. She looked tired but happy. She stopped when she saw me sitting at the kitchen table, my arms crossed. "Oh, good morning," she said, trying to sound casual. "Feeling better." "Where were you?" I asked. My voice was low and dangerous. Mia sighed and kicked off her heels. "Relax, Zoe. I did you a favor." "A favor?" I stood up. "You stole my dress. You stole my identity. You went on a date with my boyfriend, Mia. How is that a favor?" She rolled her eyes and walked to the fridge to get a bottle of water. "Look, you were sick. You were going to cancel. Mark would have been disappointed. I just stepped in so he wouldn't be lonely. I saved the night." "You deceived him," I shouted. "He thinks he was with me. He thinks I want to quit my job and move to Peru." Mia laughed, a short, cruel sound. "Well, maybe you should want that. Mark seemed to really like the fun, Zoe. The Zoe who isn't obsessed with spreadsheets and deadlines. Honestly, sis, he was bored with you. I spiced things up. Her words hit me like a slap in the face. He was bored with you. Was it true? Was I too boring? Was I too predictable? You have no right, I said, my voice trembling. You have to tell him, right now. Mia slammed the fridge door shut. Her face hardened. I'm not telling him anything, and neither are you. If you tell him, you'll just embarrass yourself. You'll look like a fool, and he'll look like an idiot for not knowing the difference. It will ruin everything. Just let it go. Pretend you had a mood swing. Take the credit for being fun for once. She walked past me into the bathroom and slammed the door. I stood there in the kitchen, paralyzed. Part of me wanted to run to Mark immediately. But another part of me, the insecure part, whispered that Mia was right. If I told Mark he had been intimate and romantic with my sister, he might be so disgusted that he would leave me. Or he might realize he had more chemistry with her. I decided to stay silent. It was the biggest mistake of my life. Over the next 2 weeks, I tried to be normal. I went to work. I saw Mark, but everything felt wrong. Mark would bring up inside jokes from that night, and I would have to fake a laugh. He would touch my arm and look at me with a new intensity, expecting the wild Zoe to appear, and I would freeze. Is everything okay? He asked one evening while we were cooking dinner. You seem distant again. You were so open at the restaurant. I'm just tired, I said, chopping vegetables aggressively. Work is stressful. Maybe you really should quit, he suggested, leaning against the counter. Like you said. I don't want to quit, Mark, I snapped. He recoiled, surprised by my anger. Okay. I just thought, never mind. Meanwhile, Mia was watching. She would come over to my apartment and smirk when she saw me struggling. She seemed to enjoy the chaos she had created. But it didn't stop there. One afternoon, I was at work when I received an email from my boss. Subject, your presentation. Zoe, great job on the pitch this morning. The client loved your bold ideas. I didn't know you had that kind of public speaking energy in you. I stared at the screen. I hadn't given a pitch that morning. I had been at my desk, working on a layout. The pitch meeting was in the conference room down the hall. I stood up and ran to the conference room. It was empty now. I found my coworker, Sarah, in the hallway. Sarah, I asked breathlessly, who gave the presentation for the Johnson account. Sarah looked at me, confused. You did, Zoe. About an hour ago. You went to the bathroom, came back with your hair down, and totally crushed it. You were making jokes, walking around the room. It was impressive. My blood ran cold. Mia. She must have come to the office while I was in the break room or working with my headphones on. She had impersonated me at work. I pulled out my phone and called her. Did you come to my office? Oh, hey, Mia answered, sounding bored. Yeah, I was in the neighborhood. I saw everyone walking into a meeting and they called your name. You weren't there, so I just stepped in. You're welcome. This isn't a game, I screamed, not caring who heard me. You could get me fired. You don't know anything about graphic design. I winged it, she said lightly. They loved me. Seriously, Zoe, you need to loosen up. You're too stiff. I'm helping you build a better reputation. Stay away from my life, I warned her. Stay away from Mark, and stay away from my job. Or what? She challenged. You can't control me, Zoe. We're the same person, remember? She hung up. I was terrified. Mia was escalating. It wasn't just about the dress anymore. She was addicted to the power of being me, but a better version of me. She was erasing my identity and replacing it with hers. The breaking point came 3 days later. It was Mark's birthday. I had planned a surprise party for him at our favorite local bar. I had invited all his friends. I had ordered a cake. I wanted everything to be perfect to make up for the weirdness between us lately. I arrived at the bar early to set up decorations. I was wearing a simple black dress, and I had curled my hair. I felt nervous, but hopeful. People started to arrive. The music was playing. The atmosphere was good. Then the door opened, and Mark walked in. But he wasn't alone. Walking beside him, holding his arm, was me. Or rather, Mia. She was wearing a dress that was identical to mine. She had styled her hair exactly like mine. From a distance, even I would have struggled to tell us apart. Mark looked confused when he saw me standing by the cake. He looked at the girl on his arm, and then he looked at me. The room went silent. The music seemed to stop. Mark's friends looked back and forth between us. Surprise, Mia shouted, throwing her hands in the air. She laughed, but her eyes were cold as she looked at me. Mark pulled his arm away from Mia. He looked terrified. What is going on? Zoe, he looked at me. Zoe, he looked at Mia. I stepped forward. My legs felt like jelly, but I knew I couldn't hide anymore. I am Zoe, I said, my voice shaking. No, I'm Zoe, Mia said playfully, grabbing Mark's hand again. She's just my boring sister trying to crash the party. Mark looked at Mia. He looked at her hand on his arm. Then he looked at me. I was standing alone, my hands clenched into fists, tears stinging my eyes. I wasn't laughing. I wasn't performing. I was just heartbroken. Mark took a step back. He looked at Mia's face closely. He studied her smile. Then he looked at me. He looked into my eyes. You, Mark said, pointing at Mia. You're not Zoe. Mia's smile faltered for a second. Don't be silly, Mark. Of course I am. Remember our date. Remember how we danced. I remember, Mark said. His voice was becoming harder. I remember that night felt different. I remember thinking you changed. He turned to me. He walked across the room until he was standing right in front of me. He reached out and gently touched my cheek. You're Zoe, he whispered. How do you know? I asked, a tear rolling down my face. Because, Mark said, his voice breaking. You look at me like you love me. She looks at me like I'm a toy. He turned back to Mia. The anger in his eyes was something I had never seen before. Get out. Mia's playful mask dropped. She looked around the room. Everyone was staring at her with judgment. The game was over. She wasn't the charming, fun twin anymore. She was the liar. Fine, Mia spat. You guys are no fun anyway. I was just trying to liven things up. You should thank me, Zoe. I showed you what you could be if you weren't so pathetic. She turned and stormed out of the bar, the door slamming behind her. The silence in the room was heavy. Mark turned back to me. Zoe, I'm sorry, I sobbed. I should have told you. The night at the restaurant. I was sick. She went instead of me. I was so afraid you liked her more than me. Mark pulled me into a hug. He held me so tight, I could barely breathe. I don't want her, he said into my hair. I don't want the wild girl. I want you. I want the girl who organizes her books by color. I want the girl who is gentle and kind. I fell in love with you. That night was the end of my relationship with Mia, at least for a long time. I couldn't trust her. I realized that just because we shared a face, we didn't have to share a life. I changed the locks on my apartment door. I told my boss the truth about the presentation. It was embarrassing. But he respected my honesty. It took a long time to rebuild the trust with Mark. For months, I felt guilty. I felt like I had allowed my identity to be stolen because I wasn't confident in who I was. I had let Mia make me feel small. But slowly, things got better. I stopped trying to be more exciting. I accepted that I am a quiet person, a thoughtful person, and that is enough. 6 months later, I was walking down the street, and I saw my reflection in a shop window. For a second, I panicked. I expected to see Mia standing behind me, mocking me. But it was just me, just Zoe. I smiled at my reflection. It wasn't a wild smile. It wasn't a charming, fake smile. It was a real, calm smile. I realized then that my face belongs to me. My life belongs to me. And no matter how much someone tries to copy the outside, they can never steal what is on the inside. Although it was painful, I learned a valuable lesson. Authenticity is not about being the loudest or the most exciting person in the room. It is about being true to yourself. If you try to be someone else, you will lose the people who love you for who you really are. Mark and I are still together. We don't go to fancy restaurants often. We prefer to stay home, cook dinner, and talk. Sometimes he sketches on napkins, and I organize the bookshelf. It isn't a wild life. It isn't a movie, but it is mine, and I wouldn't trade it for anything.